I just wanted to briefly share a little bit about this tool called AuditJS and how you can use it to find dependencies in your JavaScript applications that have known vulnerabilities in them. This is a common thing that'll happen. We all know that Node.js and JavaScript projects are known for having a long tail of dependencies. I think this can be a good thing. Node was very much structured with the idea of having lots of different small packages and libraries that you could chain together to do useful things, but it does cause a bit of a headache and maintenance burden. So what AuditJS is it's a tool that is backed by this OSS Index database, which is a database of known vulnerabilities mapped to dependencies, and you can use it to scan your node projects and find dependencies that you might want to bump. It's worth pointing out here that it is rate limited, but that's if you don't have an account. To get an account is actually free, and if you just go over here to OSS Index and sign up for a free account, you can lift some of that rate limiting. I will say the rate limiting isn't very heavy, so you can still get a lot of utility out of this without that, but it's also nice too because once you have an account here, you can browse this and you can get a lot more information. So I will show you here just a project that I've been working with that I did this for recently. Now the first thing you'll want to do is make sure that you ran npm install, because AuditJS is going to assume that you have all the dependencies installed for this project. So once that's finished, what you can do here is you can just run AuditJS OSSI, assuming you have it installed. I won't go over the install instructions. You can find those in npm.js.org under AuditJS. If you have this installed, you just run this from the root of your project, and it is going to think for just a little bit, and then it's going to tell us there that it scanned 1,325 dependencies, 5 of which it found vulnerabilities for. That sounds like a lot of dependencies. It is. As I mentioned, JavaScript tends to be dependency heavy. So if we scroll back up, I'll show you one thing interesting you'll notice here is that the first dependency here that it's identifying as having several vulnerabilities in it is actually Node.js itself. So it's actually looking at the Node.js version I'm running and telling me that that is vulnerable. So that's something you want to make note of. Now, this may or may not be a problem for you in production because the version of Node that you're actually deploying against may not be the same that you're running on your developer box. But if you see this, you might want to go out and check and see what you are actually running out there in production. If it's, say, this version, you probably want to bump that. What I'm going to do is go ahead and just bump that locally right now and see if that goes away. So right now we have 5 vulnerable dependencies. If I list here, so I'm using Node Version Manager, which lets me easily switch between different versions of Node. So I'm just going to switch to using a newer version here really quick. Oops. And then what we'll do is we'll run that again and we'll see if we get the same results. So running this again, what we're going to see here is we should see 1 vulnerability less, and yes we do, we only see 4 now. So some of those were just from our Node version, which again may or may not be something that you want to be concerned with. It depends on how your production environment set up where you're deploying this to. But what you may want to look at is some of these other things that come up here. So right here, what we see is that we have this handlebar 4.4.5, which is included in our project. which is in fact showing up as having a vulnerability against it. So if we click here, we can click through to the OSS Index page, and this will show us a little more about this. And it's saying that this is CWE 94. It's improper control of generation code. It's saying that it's critical. This doesn't seem great. This seems like something that we would want to mitigate. So what we can do then, we can go over here and take a look at this. And what we actually see here is that if we look at this dependency path, we can see here that this is actually inside of the jest node module. So I think if we take a look over here, let's go ahead and just see, this is handlebars, right? I think what we're likely going to find if we look over here at our project and we look for handlebars in our package JSON is we're probably not going to find it, or certainly not that version. Yes, so it's not even in here. But what we do have in here is jest. So it looks like we have version 24.1.0. Now I'm not super worried about this because it's in dev dependencies, so that's not going to be installed in my production boxes, but it could be bad because this is something that might get ran in my CI/CD environment. In this case, it's probably not a huge deal, but if, for example, this was actually a malicious package, that could be particularly bad. There was a case a while back of somebody injecting malicious code into NPM. There's been multiple cases of that, but one in particular targeted the CI/CD environment and was altering built artifacts. So you don't want that. So more importantly, this is probably really easy to fix. If we just go to npmjs.com and we look up jest to see what the latest version is, there's a good chance it's later than what we have. In fact, it's 25.1.0. So what we can do is come over here. Let's just bump that to the current version. Let's npm install again. And then we'll rerun and we'll see if that takes care of this particular vulnerability. And lo and behold, you'll see now we are down to just 3 vulnerabilities. So let's take a look at what those are. Let's take a look at this one here. This one is telling me it's CWE 79, that there's improper neutralization of input during web page generation. And again, we can click through here. Whoops, wrong button. And click here and we can take a look at the OSS Index page. I'm going to go ahead and sign in to get a little bit more information on there. So we can see here, this shows us, what we saw there. It also shows us some of the various packages that are implicated by this. Main takeaway, though, over here is that you'll notice this view, it's not showing up in our project. We do have a dependency on view, but this one in particular appears to be underneath this view smooth scroll. So while this is against view, the actual problem appears to be with a dependency called view smooth scroll. So if we go over here and we look for that, we see there that we have this dependency, and it's at version 0.2.0. That does not seem ideal. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and we'll take a look at that in npm.js and see if there's maybe a newer version of that. So here it is. One thing you'll notice there, published 2 years ago. That's not really something I like to see in a dependency. That says to me it's possible this dependency is not being actively maintained anymore. But I mean, it could be a passion project. It's kind of a small use case thing, this particular dependency. I happen to know what it's used for here is so that you can scroll to specific elements in a page smoothly after an event. That probably doesn't take a ton of code. Maybe it's okay. So the next thing I would do here is I'd go look at the GitHub account and I'd see if maybe I can do this guy a favor and I can make a pull request so I can see how hard it'd be to bump this dependency for them and see if this person would be interested in taking that pull request. Unfortunately, what you see here is this repository has been archived by the owner. It is now read-only. I actually played around a little bit with this earlier before realizing this. Created a PR. It wasn't too hard to fix the problem, but you can't really file a PR against this repository since it's archived. And another thing I noticed while poking around too is if you're looking at their package.json, you'll notice in their scripts nothing called test, no .test files or .spec or anything like that. So this is also a repository that's not doing any sort of testing. So again, all those things are some indicators that maybe this isn't really the kind of dependency you want to be pulling into a project you're putting in production anyways. No offense to the author here. They might be a great developer, but this is something that clearly they're not spending a lot of time on anymore. That's just sort of sitting up here on the internet. So I think in this case, the right thing to do would be to not try and fix this upstream, but to actually just find a new dependency to use or write something yourself that does the job. You could also fork that and fix it, but in this case there are other dependencies that do the same thing, so that's what the tact will take here. So I happen to know that there is something called view scroll to, which I think if we go over here and look for, it does the same thing as this library. So here we go, exact match, but let's take a look at this one. You'll notice these version numbers here inspire a bit more confidence, and published 6 months ago, so much more recent. You also notice that the weekly downloads for this are significantly higher. And if you take a look over here, you can see they've got some stats displayed here, a very nice README. This project all in all is looking much more maintained. And the other thing you'll notice about this is, so if you look at how it's used here, and then you go over here back to our project, and let's just search for what we're actually doing with this library here. So you can see that it's being used here in our Nux config as a plugin. And you can also see here that we have the spot where we import it and we do this view.use. This is where it's actually actively being used. Now, point being, if you look at this library, you'll notice it has a very similar setup, pretty similar feature set. You can do this view.use. You can also pass it some options. I know that's true of the other library. And importantly, you can use it programmatically to call view scroll to an element. It is pretty much a one-to-one replacement for this, so it shouldn't be too hard to rip this out. I'm not going to go ahead and do all that typing right here on the video. I've already done that ahead of this, so I'm going to go ahead and patch that in, and we'll see where that gets us. Okay, so I went ahead and applied those changes, and you'll see here I reran the AuditJS, and we're now down to 2 vulnerable dependencies. I will go ahead and just quickly kind of show you a little bit of what I changed here. It wasn't anything too extensive. If we just go here and let's compare, let's see, compare with branch. Let's just go against, this is what we're on. So we'll see here, this was the submission form view there where the code was used. So now we're importing view scroll to, and you'll see down here, instead of the smooth scroll, we're just calling scroll to on the view scroll to. That is really the main change here. That along with, you'll see here in the package JSON, we've switched over to this package and we've removed the view smooth scroll. Because we reran npm install, package lock was also updated. And we have changed this file in the plugin directory, got rid of this old one, added this one, and we put this in here. I believe there is also a small change in Nuxt config. We're now using the view scroll to Nuxt module, and we got rid of our reference to the view smooth scroll plugin. So now we're down to just 2 vulnerable dependencies. So let's take a look and see what they are. There's one of them right here. So serialized JavaScript 1.9.1. It's got one vulnerability affecting installed version. This is another CWE 79, which is improper neutralization of input during web page generation. You'll see that one pop up a lot with web applications. Again, looking at the dependency paths here, we've got a couple of different paths that are including this, but they're both part of Nuxt. So Nuxt itself is what is pulling this in. So what we want to do then is take a look at what version of Nuxt we're using. So let's close that and let's go back to our package.json. And let's take a look here. So we're on Nuxt 2.0.0. So what do you bet that is not the latest version? Let's take a look. In fact, it is not. So not too big of a jump, so hopefully this won't cause us any problems. I will say in particular after that last change that I made, that's the sort of change where if your project has tests, you're definitely going to want to rerun them, make sure everything's okay before you push. This project does have tests. I can tell you that they all pass with that workaround I just did. And I did some manual testing as well. I can tell you the functionality is equivalent. So now we'll bump that and go back and npm install yet again. And let's check out AuditJS again. And that took care of the last 2 vulnerable dependencies. So we're now down to 0. So I think AuditJS is a nifty tool. I recommend more people use it and take a look.